Noles Nation. Welcome into the Renegade Rundown. This is our ninth episode. I've been trying to get up with my boy Jesse for a while. PlantTheSpear.com, PlantTheSpear1 on Twitter. This guy is an absolute wizard. I guarantee you've seen his graphics. His schedule is probably the back screen on your phone. Jesse, thanks for joining us, man. Tell people where they can find your stuff, man, and let's talk some Florida State football.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. I know it's been a long time in the making to put this together. And yeah, I mean, I appreciate the compliments. Like, I'm far from a professional at any graphic designer. I'm like 100% YouTube University. But, I try my best and I enjoy. I just really, that's what got me started in the whole college football thing. I just loved making stuff like hype videos and graphics. But you can always catch us at plantthespear.com. That's kind of like our hub base for everything, YouTube, podcast, the whole nine. I try and update it as much as I can. I am like George, I'm a one-man band here, so it keeps you tugging at all ways to keep up. But really on social media, I'm really active. I try and interact with everybody. So just excited to be on the show and talk about some football because, man, it feels like there's a lot to talk about now that we've gotten into some of the meat of the season.
No doubt. And some comments from Norvell has us hopeful. I kind of slipped in the title there at the last second. The games have been played, man. We've had to listen for weeks about, oh, well, y'all snuck away with the win at Boston College. Oh, well, Clemson's unranked, and y'all only won by a touchdown in overtime. Y'all should have blew them out. And then one of the worst ones, and one of the ones that just absolutely drives me nuts with the casuals, as we call them, total defense. Oh, well, the University of Florida has the number 5 defense in the nation. And it's just, they say it. They take the total off, they take the yards off. It's just defense. That's how they rank it. Florida State's 101st. And I said this, multiple times, had plenty of smart ass posts on the timeline. Like, if you believe, honestly, that defensive total yards is the measure of defense in 2023, I got, waterfront property in Arizona, this area, the whole thing. Like, it's completely nuts. And we found that out when Florida went to go see Kentucky on Saturday. Did you get to see that game?
Yeah, and I do think you're very much right in the fact that total defense is really an antiquated old school stat. It really comes down to points, especially like when you talk about Florida State, where they play a bend don't break style defense. So they're going to give up some yards, but they just trying to limit points. And when you look at like Clemson, they outgained us, but you still won the game. So at the end of the day, it's really just all about points. And like you said, Florida kind of got exposed, and I mean they ran all over that defense. I didn't actually get to watch it, but I did see some of the stats and the highlights afterwards. And really, it's just funny when you look at Florida as a whole. They came in, they lost to Utah with a pig farmer as the quarterback or whatever the case was. And it was like, all right, they're kind of terrible. And then they beat Tennessee in the swamp, and it was like, okay, well, that might be a nice win. But Tennessee's not really done anything to prove themselves. And then you look at the game against Charlotte, 5 field goals, 1 touchdown, and then they struggle against Kentucky. So I definitely think that like you said, games are starting to be played, and you're starting to see where teams are not playing cupcakes anymore. You're getting into conference play. So now things are starting to get exposed where in the beginning, you talking about Florida State's defense being bad. When you're talking about playing LSU and Clemson, and I mean Boston College they're not very good, but they're a Power 5 team. Whereas you have a lot of teams like, say, Oregon, for instance, who I think is a contender for the playoffs, but they're beating what was it? Like some Portland State 81-7. Like, if Florida State played North Alabama game 3 or something like that, I'm sure the stats would look a lot different, and people have to take that into account.
There's no doubt. You look at Tennessee, and I think they may have beaten the SEC opponent this past week, but before that, their best win was Virginia. I'm pretty sure Boston College just beat a Virginia team this
Yeah.
past week. So it's like, the kind of difference in how a Clemson, we kind of touched on this earlier before the show, the difference in how a Clemson is treated versus a Tennessee or an LSU, who all have very similar resumes. And, Clemson lost to a Florida State team who's number 5 in the nation, and a Duke team who played Notre Dame right there, kind of like it was about like the Ohio State game, except for Notre Dame pulled it out at the end. It was a very good game. Prayers to Riley. I hate to see him go out. Nobody would wish any injury on him. As tough as that game was going to be, hopefully he can. They say it's a high ankle sprain. Hopefully he can get back. But yeah, man, the games have gotten played. And we've seen, a little bit calming down of the narratives. Finally, it's fun to just finally see them all crushing down. And it's funny, some people still tried to spin it. It's crazy. The same exact people who were bashing Florida State for that Clemson loss are praising Georgia and saying, oh, well, that was just, a championship resolve and, pulling it out at the end. It's just funny to hear the differences, but
Yeah, I agree. And like we were talking about before the show, I posted something that probably half of Twitter has seen by now because it absolutely exploded. Where I screenshotted the Clemson Florida State game and the Georgia Auburn game, and I was like, one of these will be considered a struggle against an unranked team, and one of these will be a gritty road win. And everybody knows which one I'm talking about for which one. And people jumped all over it. And half the people agreed, and half the people didn't. But what I found strange was that everybody was like, okay, well, they're still the defending that two-time national champion. And I'm like, man, that's great. But those teams in 2021 and 2022 don't do anything for you in 2023. And that's why I think the playoff rankings get it right by not coming out early like the AP, because I mean, when you look at Georgia, and I'm not saying that Georgia's not good. They're probably the most talented team in the country right now. They got some things I don't think they're as good at this year, but somebody said the other day, well, your best win now has 2 losses when you look at LSU. And I was like, yeah, but Georgia's best win is a 3-2 Auburn team. Now you look at South Carolina, that's who Tennessee beat and beat them pretty good, I believe. So now your best wins are against a 2-win team and a 3-win team that both have 2 and 3 losses. So it just gets treated differently with the SEC bias. And we all know that. And I mean, of course, people are going to say ACC fans or Florida State fans are complaining or whatever, but I think the perfect example, and this is something that really got hammered home on that thread, was when you look at 2014 Florida State. They were coming off an undefeated season, national champion, Heisman winner, and game control was invented during that season, it felt like, and they were dropping Florida State even though they hadn't lost any games. So, I mean, if you need any more proof that the standard is not the standard, it is different, then to me, that's what it is. That's what
they kept that thing in their back pocket for almost 10 years. Florida State's good again, and they whipped it back out again. Oh, well, here's game control. Florida State just ain't controlling the game. But all these SEC teams, it's a gritty road wins. Probably the best win for that conference all year would have been an A&M over Miami, except for they didn't. A&M got smoked. And now you're looking at a game with A&M and Alabama. The winner of that game looking like they're going to win the SEC West. A&M has a real solid path if they can beat Alabama, and we've seen less crazy things happen. All of a sudden, I mean, it's just unreal. Not to harp on this, but it is to listen to and see and have to hear that rhetoric about the SEC all throughout the year about the different recruits and everything. It's nice to see them, kind of down there with the peasants for a change, and I'm definitely going to get my laugh on it, especially from all the heavy talk preseason about. You only caught LSU the first game of the year and this and that. So, like I said, I won't harp on it too long, but it sure feels good to see it all come back to the normal.
I agree. And, somebody said the other day on that thing I posted that it was SEC over ACC. And I looked it up, and the ACC currently is 4-2 against the SEC, with the 2 losses being Tennessee over Virginia, which is the worst team in the conference. And then I believe Georgia Tech might have lost to an SEC team or something like that. But either it was 2 really the worst teams in the ACC, but they're still 4-0. So I think the SEC is a very top-heavy conference, but they're down this year, like you said, and I think it's fun to watch. I mean, it is like to see Alabama, go into South Florida and have a 17-3 game. Like that's really interesting. But again, when you bring up the whole Clemson situation, like it really is, I get their resume doesn't look great when you look at the wins, but when you look at who they lost against, I really do feel like that's probably when we were talking about this a little bit before the show. If you take the top 25 and you put them in that situation, because everybody likes to talk about Florida State escaped in overtime. If you put Duke back in that situation 3 weeks later, or 4 weeks later, when Clemson had a chance to sort out some of the mistakes, because we know Duke, they earned a win. They look good. They look legit. And hopefully Riley Leonard's okay, like you said. But a lot of that had to do with what Clemson did to themselves and all the fumbles and turnovers. If you put them in that situation Saturday against where Florida State played, sold out crowd, Death Valley, somewhere they have lost 3 games now since 2016, I don't think Duke wins that game a second time. I don't think half the teams in the top 25 go into Death Valley and beat Clemson. it's just a hard place to win, and that's a really talented team, 5th highest blue chip ratio in the country. So I really do think that that win is being over or undervalued, but I think Clemson does have a chance with Notre Dame and UNC coming up to kind of right the ship. And of course, we'll see how things go with Duke and Riley Leonard, because that's obviously going to be an absolutely massive loss if he's not even at 100%, because his legs are what drive that offense. So, yeah, man, I think the game's getting played. It really, it's like Warren Buffett always used to say that you can tell who's been swimming naked when the tide goes out. And like now you can see when teams really start to play tough competition, you can see who was feasting on cupcakes and who wasn't.
Yeah, I like that one. And yeah, Clemson, they've kind of been putting it together week by week. Their offense took a step, against us, and then they took another step against Syracuse. That was a kind of 4-quarter domination. I didn't watch the game, but just kind of watching the score and hearing, looking at the box score and hearing. I listened to a little bit of Dabo's post-game press conference. They were really, really happy with that performance. And like you said, they've got opportunities. They play Miami this year. All of a sudden, that's going to be a big game. Miami, unfortunately, they don't get tested much. I'm not sure when they get North Carolina. Maybe it's the second or third week of October. But basically, that A&M game was their only test for the first 6, maybe 7 weeks. But then, wow, yeah, Miami gets their test in the second half of the schedule. They get Clemson, they get Florida State, they get North Carolina, like you said. So we're going to find out, if Miami is for real or not. And, while we're on this conversation, we might as well talk about the ACC championship. Currently, it's us and Duke with the tiebreaker over Clemson. Duke, even though they didn't lose a game, they lost Riley Leonard. At least he's going to be out for at least a game, judging by the injury, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Those high ankle sprains are really, really tough. But it puts Florida State in a really good driver's seat. But Louisville, and we all know it coming into the year, Louisville was going to have a tough or an extremely easy schedule. They drew nobody just about out of the old Atlantic division this year. And I'm pretty sure they missed North Carolina too. I might be mistaken on that. But they missed just about everybody. I think they play a Notre Dame, but it doesn't count towards the AC standings. They're currently 5-0. I believe they may have they just snuck in the rankings at number 25. It's looking like FSU Louisville collision course. What do you think? Who are you leaning towards meeting in that ACC championship if Florida State can handle business and get there?
I want to say that I think North Carolina is one you have to consider, just because they do have a pretty good, they got Drake May, but then you look at they struggled against Appalachian State, who had a down year last year as well, even though they did beat Texas A&M. But I would have said possibly Duke, but Riley Leonard, that's like we talked about, that's a huge loss. And even if he is back, when you have a mobile quarterback with a high ankle sprain, if he can't run the ball, when they played Clemson, he had 98 of their 199 rushing yards. And if he's not able to be mobile, and I pulled their schedule up, they get NC State at home, which NC State has not been that great. They actually just made a change at quarterback. Brennan Armstrong got benched. They're going back with the freshman that played last year. And then they got to travel to Louisville. So if you look at, then they got Florida State and then Louisville coming up. So they got some tough games. And if Riley Leonard's not back, that could spell trouble for them. But I really do think you have to look at Louisville, like you mentioned, because they just have a Charmin soft schedule, and they just really don't play anybody out of the ACC. Now, they've done well. I mean, you can't argue with being 5-0. When you look at some of the teams that they played, they really haven't beat anybody. They had a tight game, a squeaker against Georgia Tech, who just lost a Bowling Green. So we'll see. I mean, they got Notre Dame, like you said. They got Pitt, which they are terrible this year. I think they're definitely completely out of the conversation. They do have Miami.
Major disappointment.
Man. Which I'm not going to lie.
That might be our second toughest game.
Right. I'm not sad to see it, because that's a tough, that could be a tough place to win on the road late in the season. But I've said since the Boston College days, I'm not high on Dracovic, and he's not really that good. So I think it's got to be.
He must have got dinged up. You think he had a bad concussion his freshman or sophomore year? It's because he's not been that same guy at all from his freshman year. He looked like an NFL quarterback as a freshman.
Yeah, and he's missed time every season. And you got to imagine the disaster situation he played at in Boston College behind that offensive line. It's just absolutely terrible. Yeah. And I thought maybe they'd be better this year, but Pitt just lost so much. He might have been a good addition, but when you lose your top running back, your top receiver, a lot of the pieces on the defense, I'm really surprised that they've struggled like they have. But it ain't hurting my feelings. You know what I mean? Like,
It's hard, man. Those hit rates, it's hard to get those hit rates high. When you get plundered year over year after year, I think you're
yeah,
seeing a little bit of that same thing with South Carolina, to where it's like, man, they've been recruiting great, but when you hit and a guy becomes a Jaheim Valley, you don't want it hurts really bad to see him going out the
right.
back door.
Yeah,
But right here, Smooth Criminal, to gotta get a smooth transition. You kind of mentioned it in passing earlier. Health, health, health. Listening to Mike Norvell, looking at the depth chart, I saw you posted a depth chart, stylized with the Plant Studio graphics on it on Twitter, and I was looking at it, man. Good sign as far as on the offensive line. It looks like Robert Scott is going to be back. I didn't see it or right there with him. Akeem Dent, no change. It still says Akeem Dent starting or Kevin Noles, so I'm not sure if he'll be back. But just listening to how Norvell spoke, even more so than the depth chart, it sounds like we're going to get a couple guys back. And, I mean, it's going to be meaning so much, especially in a game, whatever you want to call it, a get-right game. Who do you think kind of the most important guy to get back? Maury Smith, that's the third one. Maury Smith, I'm pretty sure he's just the starter on the bottom line. So I'm pretty sure Maury Smith is going to be back in the starting lineup for good. So hopefully Robert Scott and King Dent can join him as well.
yeah. The or was removed from Maury Smith, and from what people were saying, that he did play against Clemson, but he was getting treatment almost every play, so he was not necessarily healthy. He was just battling.
Right.
Then you do see Robert Scott come back, but it's weird. There's no or, and I looked at it 2 times just to make sure I wasn't tripping or anything. But Bless Harris is there in bold as well, so maybe they're co-starters. Maybe I really don't think that you need him in this game. Maybe you use this to get him in rhythm for the next 2 games. But I think if it's questionable, you leave him out. When you look at Akeem Dent, that to me is one of the most important pieces to get back. But like you said, he was listed last week and didn't play. So we know FSU doesn't really give out injury information. So it's hard to know. But I think really the number one thing of the bye week and getting healthy is Jordan Travis. I mean, clear as day, the most important player at the most important position was the most banged up. And when you look at the shoulder brace on the left hand, he took a hit to the helmet with his passing hand last time against Clemson. So he had a hand injury there. And when he can't run the ball, and it's not, I don't think that he can or he can't. I think Jordan knows that, like, he has to be the quarterback of this team if they're going to win the ACC and go to the playoffs. And I think he's being a little precautionary to keep himself in the game and keep himself protected. But without his run threat, we see how much they struggle to run the ball. And I think Virginia Tech is a game that you can really get the run game going. They've not played well on rush defense except for against Pitt last week. But I think Jordan really is the one to get healthy more than anything. But, yeah, the offensive line being back, that will be huge for them. And then Akeem Dent, I just really feel like you've missed that veteran presence on the back end of the defense. You already had to replace Jamie Robinson. You bring in Shaheem Brown, who's been really quiet this year. Maybe not good, not bad, but he's still a young guy. And then you bring in Kevin Noles, who's not necessarily young, but never played the position. So I think you lose that quarterback on the back end of the defense. So hopefully he's available to go. I don't know that you need him in this game, but the one thing I will say about Virginia Tech, and I know we'll talk about them in a little bit, they might have found something at quarterback. And that guy is a pretty legit dual threat, which obviously that makes you nervous because the way we saw them do against Boston College. But I will say one thing, and I have not yet gotten to watch the press conference. I'm going to do that tomorrow. But I did hear that one thing that he touched on, and honestly, I'm glad that he did. I know a lot of times coaches don't speak on this, but talked about the illness and the flu that was going around, because Mike Norvell is a very detail-oriented person, and I am very convinced that he always knows what's going on. He hears the noise. He knows all these things, and he knows that the close wins are costing his team, and they need that kind of style point win. So I think it was good to kind of give some footing to the rumors that, yeah, that had a lot to do with why we had to close games. Now, it's not an excuse. I mean, you got to overcome it, but I'm glad that they kind of touched on
multiple weeks.
Right.
That was the key point in that quote that I pulled out, that we have been, had injuries for multiple weeks. It wasn't just like they were sick for the one game. It bled into probably 3 games total. If it's a 2-week sickness, that's only 2, from 2 Saturdays, that's 3 games that it could have covered. So
Right, exactly.
Also, with Jordan Travis's arm, like you said, even though it was a thrown shoulder, still like you said, and that people just totally forget. Hell, I forgot he had the injury on his hand. Um, just getting him and just the entire team. We started with a brutal stretch. Say what you want to say about LSU, Boston College, Clemson, all three of them. Those are three. Not so much LSU seeing more and more out of them, but Boston College and Clemson especially physical teams, and that this team had to rise to the occasion to win those football games and getting everybody healthy, facing up against that team, hopefully getting a Akeem Dent, but like my guys say, get that running game going. If we can get Maurice Smith more healthy in there, I'm with you. If Scott's questionable, and I can't speak on the specifics of his injury, but the injury he has, I would feel more comfortable with him taking another week. If you got to take Virginia Tech, take it. And even Syracuse if that's what it needs to be. But if he's ready to play, even the more better. We need to get this running game going. And a big part of that, like you said, is Jordan Travis being more healthy. And I haven't got to see this guy yet. I'm not sure if you know his name, but I don't know if I need to do a stage like seance or something against running quarterbacks. But it's so scary just because if you have any offensive coordinator worth his salt, he's going to run those out-breaking routes, clear out the middle, and we got killed on some of those plays. Pretty much against every team we played this year, and God forbid we find out about Virginia Tech's got a new Michael Vick back there, but this team should handle business. Are there any keys to the game you see coming up, on both sides?
Yeah, and I do think that it is a little worrisome. And I will say, as far as the run game goes, too, one thing else that I forgot to mention on the depth chart is Keziah Holmes is now running back number 2 over Rodney Hill.
I did not notice that.
I'm not 100% sure if that's like health related or whatnot, or maybe he just had a good week in practice. But Keziah Holmes is a guy that I've kind of been quietly saying all along that if this running game is struggling, give him a look. I mean, he was a legit all-purpose back out of high school, scout team player of the year at Penn State. So, like, to me, I'd like to see him get some carries as well. But yeah, when you look at Virginia Tech, the Kyron Drones, he is a guy that a former 4-star high school recruit, comes in from Baylor as a transfer. And I was doing some research on him earlier, and he's had over 75 yards on the ground in 3 of the games that he's played. He pretty much took over at the Rutgers game, Rutgers, Marshall, and Pitt, and he's had 75 yards on the ground every game. Now, he had a really good game against Pitt, but it's hard to judge based off Pitt because when I got to looking at him, Pitt's they're just not good this year. They're just really not good this year. So it's hard to know what it is. So, but I think when I asked the guys earlier, that some guys that I know from Virginia Tech that we're actually going to do a crossover pod tomorrow, I asked them, I said, hey, I'm going on tonight. I haven't had a lot of time to do a bunch of research yet. Give me, like, what is Virginia Tech's biggest strength and what is their biggest weakness? And what they said was the overall biggest strength is defensive secondary and pass coverage can be locked down. Overall biggest weakness, offensive line is small, inexperienced, and not very talented. But they said for this one, you just have to look at, they have nothing to lose, but the size, speed, and athleticism will be a decided advantage. Now, the immediate thing that jumped out to me was the secondary, because you're thinking, okay, we love to pass the ball, right? We have good receivers. Have they been tested yet? So I decided to look it up. They are actually number 10 in passing defense, which is kind of surprising. But the best passing offense they faced so far is 57th, which was Purdue. And 3 of the 5 teams they played were ranked below 100 in passing offense. So to me, it's always important to provide context around something. When you say you're the 10th best, who have you played? So when you talk about that, I think it's going to be containing drones. You can't have another Boston College game where they ate you up, Castellanos, and then he really hasn't done anything like he did against you since. But, we can maybe excuse that with the flu. I think you're going to have to stop him, and then I think you're going to have to get the run going. I think that is the number one thing with them. When you look at them, they did hold Pitt to 38 yards rushing, which is kind of embarrassing. But Pitt is pretty terrible at running the ball. They are 112th in rushing offense.
I'm not sure how much they've rushed in their other games.
Right. They're 110th, or 112th. But when you look at Virginia Tech, they did give up over 200 yards on the ground in 3 of their 5 games, and Rutgers ran for almost 300 yards on them on the ground. So I really think this is your opportunity to run the game and then contain drones, and I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, this running game, that's a big note. I've already touched on it a couple times. He's touched on it. We have got to get the running game going. I guarantee that's going to be a big point of emphasis from Mike Norvell and his coaching staff. You've seen him come out in the first half of the Southern Miss game after some drops in the LSU game, emphasizing the pass, getting Johnny Wilson back going off the snide. He mentioned Keziah Holmes. We saw Keziah Holmes make a couple plays in that Southern Miss game, and then we did not see him at all, it seems like, the past two games. I'm with you, man. I've been saying all offseason that I think he can be the Trey Benson of this year. Maybe it's going to take a little while to get him infused into the offense. Maybe it's 5 or 6 games into the year. But I feel like if he can get in there and get the touches, he has the vision. And Trayshawn Ward off the team, I think he probably has the best vision of all the backs we have currently with, Rodney still being kind of young. And, as much as I love Trey, we all know that, necessarily vision and picking holes, out in the middle isn't necessarily his strong suit. He's more of a get it going and get outside with it, guy. Not in a bad way. I mean, he's a stud. If you can get out there one-on-one, you're not going to tackle that guy. And when he is, kind of streaky, he can start picking those holes. He just needs the touches. He needs 10, 15, 20 touches. But in this current climate with this new clock running clock, it's just you just can't run the ball like you used to. You're only going to have 3 or 4 possessions the entire game. Really, especially these first halves, when it's not like teams just passing because they're behind on one side or the other. It seems like these first halves, you blink and they're gone. It's just commercial, halftime.
Yep.
I mean, because these clocks, if you run it, it just eats up what used to be, these 3-4 minute scoring drives. They're 5, 6, 7 minutes, and it's just you just really have to be extremely sound and have success rate is extremely important in red zone. More than anything is extremely important. And I'm hoping to see us continue. We're now 17 of 17 in the red zone with, I believe, 14 touchdowns. So hopefully see that continue. But get down there by running the ball against this Virginia Tech team. And on the defensive side, you mentioned their offensive line being small. I'd really like to see some sacks from that defensive line. They've been kind of underappreciated and undervalued by the kind of national narrative as a whole. But if you've watched the games, guys like Jared Verse have just been unreal. Teams have just been, scheming to not get sacked and let Jared Verse ruin the game. Well, the way he's doing, it's like go watch Prince Amelia, however you say it, for Florida, #1 play defensive end and play the run against Kentucky. And then you go through Jared Verse tape and you see the difference in quality and why one's a first-round draft pick. We're not so sure about.
Yeah, and I really think like people undersell the fact that you can affect the game without affecting the game. I know that sounds weird, but like you don't have to necessarily have sacks to affect the game. Setting the edge, containing a mobile quarterback, because I also think people have to realize too that so far 2 of the games that you played so far, and Klubnik's not mobile, but he's not a statue either. Now you're looking at 3 of the games you played so far have been against mobile quarterbacks. You're just not going to get big sack numbers against mobile quarterbacks because you don't want to really chase them out of the pocket, which is something you got to watch out for this one as well. So I will say, like when you touched on red zone, when I looked at Virginia Tech, they're currently 126, allowing 100% of scoring trips in the red zone. So that's something that Florida State hopefully can capitalize on as well. Their red zone defense, their defense is better than their offense so far, but their red zone defense has been terrible. Now they scored at 80% clip, so not too bad there. But I do, if you circle back to the run game as well, I do think you bring up a good point. Like, what was it, Boston College? I think they had like 1 or 2 possessions in a whole quarter, just because they run the ball. And so that's really, it makes you be efficient with your possessions, and you have to be able to capitalize and get points when you get the ball, because you just really don't know how many times you're going to be able to get it. And I do think that they have to be able to establish a run. Like you said, I think it's going to be a point of emphasis for them. And I think the thing about Virginia Tech is this is a game that it does look a little bit different with Drones as quarterback. I will say that. Like I initially did a Q&A for a Virginia Tech blog where I wrote for them this week, an article. And I had to email him back after that game. And I was like, hey, I need to change something real quick. And I gave him an extra 7 points because Florida State and most defenses struggle with a mobile quarterback. So I gave them a little bit extra, an extra 7 points just because of that. And I think we are going to get into garbage time. But I think this is an opportunity for you to try some things, for you to work on some different concepts, some different players. The thing is, when we talk about the first 4 games, Norvell knows how much the season means, and I don't think he's taken any risk. I don't think he wants to play games in the first couple of games. I think he wants to keep his A1, show horses in the game at all times in those big games. But now you look at a game against Virginia Tech, maybe you do give those guys some burn. Another one, Ja'Kai Douglas is back on the depth chart. That's a guy that you could look at in the slot. You also have Portier. I didn't realize he was injured, and then I looked up on some injury website that tracks injuries. Of course, we know Florida State, like I said, they don't put anything out. But he hadn't played, and he was listed as an injury on that site. We just don't know what. So now he's back on the depth chart. So maybe you could start to see them get some new faces rolling in this game and kind of establish some things. Because I think this is one that you can't overlook it. But I think being at home in front of a sold-out crowd, I think they should be able to dang near cover the spread and be able to work on a few things going forward. Because you got some tough games. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a second. But when you look at the schedule going forward, we thought when you hit the bye week that it was going to be kind of a cakewalk after that. And I think it's a little bit tougher now. So you do need to sort some things out. I think you're still good enough to beat the rest of your schedule, easily. But I think you need to really sort out this passing defense and this rushing offense to be able to get as far as you want to go.
Yeah, you bring up a real good point. Mike Norvell understands, and he's been hearing the chirping. If at all possible, like you said, if we can handle business and cover the spread, he's going to go out there. He's going to try to beat that spread. He's going to try and put up some points. And I like what you said. I want to see Keziah Holmes get in there. I want to see Ja'Kai Douglas hit one of his famous wheel routes. All that great stuff. All that great stuff. But what I don't want to see is what we saw in the Southern Miss game. I don't want to see 102 players play or whatever it was crazy like that. I want to see whatever these 60 guys, are too deep, get out there and really hammer home, some repetitions and get some really good reps with some good players. One of the things that Jordan Travis does amazingly well is spread the ball out. One of the things this year with this clock, like we were just talking about, it ties into every part of the game. Part of the reason you can't afford to run so much is just because when you have a Johnny Wilson, when you have a Keon Coleman, and these possessions are so limited, it's like you have got to get those guys touches. I predicted that after Keon only had 3 targets, I predicted he'd have 10 in the Clemson game. He ended up having 9, so I was right on the money there, and we won the game. He ended up, he didn't hit them all. Nate Wiggins played amazing, but Nate Wiggins goes down. He catches the ball. The rest is history. We got to relax for the bye week. Like you said, not to look past Virginia Tech. We'll get more in-depth with Virginia Tech later on this week. We've got the co-host of the Boundary Corner podcast, the Virginia Tech podcast, coming through here on Thursday at 7 Eastern. So look out for that. But, yeah, looking forward on the schedule past Virginia Tech, you've got a Syracuse team who, just because Clemson handled them, we can't look past them. Gino Babers always gets his team really up for a couple games of the year, and even though it's at home, you never know. And then Duke. So we'll see what happens with Ryan Leonard, going forward. When it comes to recruiting, I know everybody wants to hear about recruiting. There is one thing I wanted to touch on. I'm sure everybody saw Charles Lester last week visiting Florida. Maybe another guy did, and a lot was made about that from the UF guys, chirping like they know about, and a flip, and he's saying that Florida had, the best defense in the nation. Well, after this game against Kentucky, I think all that's kind of mellowed out, and just understand that this staff isn't done recruiting. Just because Charles Lester makes a visit to Florida, he's a Nole, and unless there's something, if there's something that serious comes out, we'll talk about it. But as of now, I don't think there's anything to worry about there. When it comes to recruits, we're after it's October, so I'm expecting a couple commits this month. I'm not sure. It's been kind of hot, quiet on the Jamari Howard front. LJ McCray, a guy that we really wanted, is bumped up to a 5-star status. I think across the board now. I haven't heard anything, great our way. It's not looking like we get him. Booker Pickett Jr. is a guy I think we do land along with Jamari Howard. It's just a matter of time. I think he's a guy that could possibly pop in October. But just don't get too bummed out about there not being any big recruiting news. Just know there are 2 or 3 names of guys that people haven't even heard of. We've mentioned a time or two on here. this staff is going to make a run at the number one class. And this play on the field for the second year in a row is really fueling that recruiting. And we've seen across the nation kind of the philosophy that Mike Norvell's put in place has been the right one. The teams like Alabama struggling, having 30, 40 guys end up leaving after the year and trying to get it together. Outside of Georgia, Georgia's really the only team in that top that hasn't had significant portal players come in. Still doing it kind of the old way. Clemson's been beat to death. We kind of talked about their falling off this year and losing 2 games already. But have faith in Mike Norvell and the recruits are coming. And just October is going to be a big month. I'm not sure when, but just look forward and we'll have more in the coming weeks. Look out for some big recruits to pop and don't worry about our recruiting to get plundered. Just keep watching some of these other guys like Florida. Again, I'm sorry to bring them up, but who knows? Maybe a couple guys on there that could flip our way before it's over with.
Yeah, and I don't. Most people know I don't really get like super deep into recruiting, but one thing I will say about recruiting is, especially right now, you have to keep in mind that two major things. One, these kids are playing high school football right now, so they're not going to be extremely active. Two, Florida State's only had 1 home game this year, so you really haven't had an opportunity to get kids into that atmosphere, and we know that's a big sell for recruits as well. And then also, I think when you look at the philosophy that Mike Norvell and them have shifted to in this last year or so, where they're really heavily recruiting the state of Florida and Georgia, where you're getting a lot of more local commits. So if you have a team like Florida that falls apart at some point, that's going to sway things a little bit in your direction. And then we'll see, like we talked about with Miami, we don't know if they're legit or not. Say they drop 2 or 3 games and they do kind of what I think I'll give them credit. I think they're better this year than they were last year. But if they were, if they put together like a 9-win season, maybe you get a little bit of proof there that things are turning around. But I still think if Florida State can come out and have the season that we expect them to have. Meanwhile, the other 2 in-state schools are kind of struggling a little bit. UCF's not really doing much in the Big 12 so far. I really think you'll see that momentum pick up. They blew, a 35-point lead or something like that. It was crazy against a team that lost to Texas State. So I think once you get the
freezing
momentum.
Cold take.
Oh,
freezing
man.
Cold take. I think when they were up early, somebody tweeted out, man, if this is Power 5 football, give me more of it.
I know.
Yeah, they're learning real quick that it's a little different when you have to play these Power 5 teams week in and week out, and it's just getting started. It's going to be a long year for them, but the head coach knows about it, but it's just a transition process.
Yeah, they talked a lot of junk in the offseason, about they were one of the big 3 and whatnot, and they got a little arrogant because they beat a team like Navy or some, or no, they lost to Navy, but they beat like Georgia Tech or something, like one of the bottom dwellers of the ACC, and all of a sudden they think they're part of the Power 5 and the big 3 and all that. And it's like, we were talking about it the other day. It's like, man, it sounds fun and all to be competitive in the Power 5 until you actually have to go do it. And then it's a lot different. So I do, and I think that's, at the end of the day, it's probably good for Florida State, because when you look at, they have some Big 12 money and they're Power 5 now, them having a bad season, it's not terrible for you. You know what I mean? It's not. So I think
get a star, we can pull them over, so it'll be good.
Right. So I think they're fine.
I don't know the farm system.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
William McMahon picks up a big point before we move on. Fuller, you need to keep bringing that blitz. This is something we talked about on another show, on the Voice of College postgame show, me and James Coleman, this past Saturday. Adam Fuller, they have been really big on being more conservative in the first half and not blitzing. Most recently in this Clemson game, I believe it was 10% in the first half. They blitzed, sent more than 4, and in the second half it was 40%. Giant difference. You saw a difference in the defense, the way it played. All of a sudden, Cade Klubnik didn't have all day. Those blitzes, or those rushes that weren't getting there in the first half were getting there in the second half, and it was a totally different game. Of course, you saw the big Kalen DeLoach hit on that Green Dog blitz, I believe it was. Talking to James, I believe he said Tatum Bethune actually saw it and he called for the Green Dog blitz. Kalen DeLoach comes, the running back missed it. The rest is history, win the ball game. But yeah, I agree. I would like to see him blitz a little bit more in the first half. But Adam Fuller and Mike Norvell, they've got the method to their madness. I don't want to sit here and try to tell Adam Fuller how to coach. I'm pretty much an Adam Fuller apologist. I think I've seen steady improvement, and people want to look at total defense and stuff. When you look at the advanced metrics, he's went from like 80 to 40 to top 15 by the end of the year last year. I think we just have a really hard start to the schedule. I think you give him this Virginia Tech and the Syracuse game, get Akeem Dent back. I think people are going to love Adam Fuller by the end of the year. We'll see how it plays out, but again, for sure, I'd like to see him blitz a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more early, maybe 25% of downs in the first half versus just a 10%. But there's a method to the madness, and yeah, get pressure on these quarterbacks, and especially these young mobile quarterbacks. We need to hit them. We don't need to let them run around and get open. Especially this guy, like you mentioned, the Virginia Tech kid. We just, I want to see some big plays in the backfield, and I think we will. I think we will against Virginia Tech this Saturday at home. That's the other big thing that you mentioned. This homestand is huge, and when it comes to recruiting and everything else, like I said, we'll probably get a couple guys in October, but this homestand and coming back home November 11th against Miami at Doak Campbell, hell, even if they were to sneak away a win, that atmosphere is going to be nuts. There's going to be a million recruits in the house. I think we win it by a couple touchdowns, even as good as Miami's looked. Man, that November 11th game is going to be nuts. I cannot wait. It's going to be one of the biggest atmospheres at Florida State in a long, long time. It's going to rival those Oklahoma games back in the day, like 2011.
Yeah, I definitely agree, man. And like, I will say that I was at Oklahoma in 11, and I will definitely say that it was the loudest atmosphere that I've ever heard in Doak, without a doubt. And most people agree with that. And it's funny, actually, one of the other games that really stands out to me with the last time I went to Florida State Miami in Doak Campbell was 2013. And that and Oklahoma are the two largest crowds in Doak history, I do believe. But man, while it was loud for the Oklahoma game, that Miami game was just different. I mean, it was the most wild, just fun atmosphere that I've ever been around. There was like literally piles of liquor bottles the size of a Volkswagen Bug at the gate. I mean, it was so much fun. So I think this year it's going to be the same way. And if Miami keeps winning and Florida State keeps winning, it could be a game day location or something like that. I mean, when you talk about a rivalry like that, I think that's going to be a huge one. But I will say, just to touch on the Fuller blitzing thing, I did see some of the quotes that came out today where he said that if you could blitz all the time and it would work, they would do it, but they can't because it doesn't. So sometimes you do things in the first half to set up the second half. And I will say two quick things on that is I would like to see them blitz more in the first half, just because blitzing in the first half is more of a tone setter, where you're going to come out and hit somebody in the mouth and let them know that you're here to play. But I do also think part of what they're doing, and this is something Norvell talked about this offseason, was he looked at all the top teams, like Georgia's and Alabama's, and how they rotated their defensive line. And they've started to model that. And I think what you're seeing now is them kind of just hanging around, running or dancing around the ring a little bit in the first half, keeping some guys fresh. And then in the second half, when they got you gassed, that's when they really start throwing the body blows. And that's when you've really seen them have the best second half so far against LSU and Clemson, holding them to only 7 points apiece. So, like you said, there's a method to the madness, and I don't think Fuller is a bad defensive coordinator. I'd like to see him be a little more aggressive because I think they play better when they're aggressive. But, you look at the secondary has really been your main weakness, and I think you're dealing with some, you got some injuries there and stuff like that. So I think they're going to be fine in the long run. I think Adam Fuller's a really smart guy. You just have a lot of stuff when you watch the film that it's just mistakes and it's blown assignments and things like that. And it's funny, I actually had someone comment the other day, it's like, Adam Fuller needs to be fired because there's too many blown assignments. And I was like, you realize you literally just said that people were not doing what they were supposed to be coached to do. Now I understand it's on them to fix it, but like it's not all Adam Fuller. So they could be more aggressive, but I think they'll be fine. We'll just see. And I think this is a good question here. The way that the season is going, you really, and I think this would be fun to kind of talk about for just a quick second. There's really no juggernauts out there this year, which makes it exciting. And I feel like the portal and NIL have really kind of spread the butter on the toast a lot more evenly, where you're not seeing a lot of concentrated talent. You're getting a lot of the backups that are starting now. Like you're getting a former Clemson quarterback starting at Appalachian State. So you're seeing things like that where the competition is starting to get better. And I think that's something when you looked at going into playoffs, it was like, okay, let's win the games on our schedule before we worry about the playoffs. But now when you start looking ahead and dreaming, And everyone wants to talk about Florida State and their close games. I mean, like we mentioned, Georgia doesn't look that dominant. Michigan looks good, but they haven't played anybody. Ohio State, the jury's kind of out on them. They didn't really look impressive against Notre Dame. So there's really no juggernauts out there. So you really don't know what can happen. If Florida State can peak at the right time, and we know last year when they came out of the bye week, the next 4 games they won, I think it was 173-39. If they can have that kind of improvement, and I will say the last point on the defense is you did play a lot of okay offenses last year, and you had 6 teams, I think, on the schedule that were in the first year of their coaching staff. So I think you're just seeing a little bit better competition this year against your defense. And of course, you had to replace Jamie Robinson, who's an NFL draft pick, leader in tackles the last 2 years for your defense. That's hard to replace, but yeah, man, I think when you look at the path to the playoffs and potential national championship, I don't want to cross the bridge till we get there, but there's really no like 2021 Georgias out there waiting for you. And I think that makes you exciting if they can peak at the right time.
Yeah, there's no doubt. From what I've seen, there's no team out there that I don't believe, on the right night Florida State could beat. And that includes Georgia. There's no, like you said it, there's no juggernaut. Boy, that's crazy because the 12-team playoff is coming next year. And it would be perfect for this year. I don't have the top 25 in front of me, but man, this 9, 10, 11 teams that you could absolutely see winning the national championship. You go down the list. USC, I don't think they truly can, but they could absolutely get hot and do it. But Michigan out of the Big Ten, Penn State out of the Big Ten, Ohio State out of the Big Ten. All 3 of those teams you could see making a run and winning the playoff. Georgia out of the SEC. You could see doing it.
Oregon's a team. Washington, that's one to look at. I mean, you hate to say it because they've not looked great, but I mean, can you really ever count out Nick Saban? You never know. Yeah. And then Florida State is a team that I think you can throw in that mix. I thought maybe you could say LSU, but maybe not now. But like you said, man, this will be the perfect year for the 12-team playoff. I really do think that you have probably 6, 8, 10 teams that could really compete on any given Saturday, and I think it would be really fun to watch.
Yeah, no doubt, man. The worst to me, and I want to get your opinion on this while we kind of got on it. If Alabama wins out and they're a 1-loss team and they go to the ACC championship and beat Georgia, I had somebody telling me they think Georgia gets in, but I don't think they do. Do you think a 1-loss Georgia gets in if they lose in the SEC championship? Is there any chance of 2? I think there's a chance if Alabama is a 2-loss, or say the SEC West winner is a 2-loss and beats Georgia, the SEC could be left out. That's my question with it. A 2-loss SEC West champion wins the SEC championship. Do you see the SEC being left out of the playoff?
I think it's certainly a possibility. The only hang-up I have on that is seeing – now, again, this is just the AP poll. This has nothing to do with the playoff rankings. But I think when you see the leeway that Georgia's getting right now, it's kind of hard to think they couldn't sneak in at 4th. But I see a situation where they could. I think you also have to consider you need Florida State to go unbeaten. I think you would need Michigan and Ohio State to be kind of in that situation where their only losses to one or the other. And then the Pac-12 could eat itself to give them a little, an extra chance. But, say you have Oregon and Washington undefeated playing in the Pac-12 championship, Michigan and Ohio State undefeated when they play their rivalry game, Florida State undefeated. I think it's certainly a possibility because when you look at Georgia's resume, it's just nothing. And now Kentucky looks a little bit better than maybe they did before, but their biggest game on the schedule this year, their one add this to the top of the list game was Tennessee. And that doesn't really look that good anymore. So I do think Georgia will go undefeated until they hit the SEC championship where they could lose one of those games. But yeah, man, I just don't think they really have a great resume. And when you look at Alabama, I don't think they have a strong resume to get in. LSU, it'd be hard to argue. They just gave up 55 points to Ole Miss. So I think there is a situation where it could happen.
Yeah, LSU's playing spoiler the rest of the way. And it kind of comes down to the Big 12. Whoever wins the Red River rivalry, I believe it's called, Oklahoma and Texas, whoever wins that needs to win out or whatever, only lose one game because the Big 12 takes a spot. The Big 10's going to get a spot. It's whatever for one of those 3 teams, they could have an argument with 2 losses, as tough as that conference is. They are what the SEC usually is, them in the Pac-12 this year. So it's like the Pac-12 and the Big 10, it's hard to see one of them not getting in. if Texas wins out, that's 3 teams right there, and you can't live out Florida State if they win out. So some
Right.
things would have to happen, but you could definitely see it. And man, SEC country would go nuts if that
Oh
were to
man,
happen.
they would be
Of course,
pissed.
Texas and Oklahoma are pseudo SEC teams. They'll be there next year, but still, they're going to be if that were to
Yeah,
happen. I still don't see it happen. I see UGA winning out, but to me, UGA has to win out to get in, and
yeah.
Alabama no more than one. They can't lose again.
I think you're right, and I think the funny thing is like, can it happen? Yes. Will they let it happen? You know, everyone jokes about like the story writers in the NFL. Like, we know there's some people that push narratives in college football and the SEC stuff like that. So, will they let them get left out? Because it would be a historic event if they did, and I would die of laughter. But I do think you bring up a good point with the Big 12 teams. I kind of overlooked them. I think Texas and Oklahoma, the winner of that game, definitely should be in contention. And I will say that I think with Florida State's case, even though LSU has 2 losses now, even though Clemson, I think they're going to finish probably ranked. They might still lose a game or, or something like that, but they still probably finish ranked. Hopefully Duke can pull off some magic and stay ranked. That would help your strength of schedule in Miami as well. But I really do think, close games or not, Florida State, no matter if LSU lost another game, if they go undefeated and go through the ACC championship, they're going to be fine. I do not see any situation where they're going to get left out as an undefeated ACC champion. I just don't see that with wins against LSU, at Clemson, at the Swamp, against Miami, who's looked good so far. Like, I don't see them getting left out. I really don't.
Yeah, the schedule's worked out. If anything, the schedule worked out tougher because I was thinking maybe you get a ranked Pitt and a ranked Duke. But if Miami, regardless of what happens at the end of the year, even if a Miami were to lose to a Clemson before they played us, I think we're still in good shape. I'm knock on wood. I'm pretty solid on Miami being ranked when we play them. And if you add that, log that in, like you said, you get that ACC champion, whoever it is now without the divisions. You're not going to get a dud out of the Coastal.
Right.
You know,
Yep.
in years past, you could end up with an 8-4 team from over there, but this year you're going to get that second best team, whether it's a 11-1 Louisville that ends up making it through, or a whatever 10-2 Duke, whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
It's
even
going to
if it's
be most
it's
likely a ranked team in the
exactly.
ACC championship game as
Exactly.
well.
Yep, exactly. I think you're just the important part is you're going to get a decent one. Like you said, it's not going to be some crap team out of the Coastal. I think you're going to have something there for sure. So that is going to help your strength of schedule. And yeah, I will say that like when you look at going down the schedule, Wake Forest doesn't look good. That's a road game. Florida doesn't look great. That's a road game. But now that you've got through the heart of your schedule, you've beat the 2 best teams on the schedule. Really, your toughest games from here on out are all at home too. So I think that does benefit you as well. Like we said, I think the schedule sets up really good for them this year. It was just could you get through the first 4 without going 2-2? And now that they went 4-0, you just can't have any unexpected games. And you kind of got away with that at Boston College. But as long as you play like you're supposed to, you get the toughest ones at home, and the road games don't look that hard. I think you'll be right where you want to be as long as you play well and stay healthy.
Yeah, last year you go 4-0, and then it's bam, like your 3 toughest games of the year, back to back to back to back. To be honest, and you're catching those teams, and all 3 of those teams when we caught them, they pretty much were like on fire too. So it was like the worst possible case scenario, and we were 4-0, so we was a hot team at that time. Just moved up into the polls. This year, bam, you win those 4, you get a bye, and you get a Virginia Tech team, you get a Syracuse team. Hopefully, we can go through and run this thing. Before we get out of here, I thought I heard you say something about a prediction. Do you want to give the people prediction before you get out of here?
Yeah. And like I said, I haven't done a ton of research yet, so it may end up changing a little, but I don't think it's going to change too much. I mean, obviously, everybody knows Virginia Tech is not that good. I mean, it's not like we're keeping a secret. So I obviously think Florida State's going to win. I think the spread's around 25, and that's something I talked about with the Virginia Tech guys. Is they were like, I think the spread of 25 sounds about right, and I predicted a 28-point win in the column that I wrote for the guy the other day, and just to touch on a couple things with Virginia Tech, when you look at S&P Plus rankings, they're at 82nd. Their offense is 94th. Their defense is 68th. Their special teams is 44th. They have not played any teams in the S&P top 60. They're 0-2 on the road against Rutgers and Marshall. I think they really did find something at quarterback. I think that's going to be a game changer for them. So I gave them 7 extra points on my prediction. I just think going on the road, outmatched in the line of scrimmage, I think Florida State's going to be able to dominate the offensive or the defensive line against their offensive line. I think you're going to just destroy them up front. and that's going to allow you to control the game. I think, like you said, I really do think Mike Norvell he knows they need to win this game by a lot. And I think they want some style points. So I think they're going to go for their throat. And while I do think, we know Florida State gives up some, we know Florida State does give up some points in garbage time. And Lord knows I would love to see us shut somebody out, because I looked it up the other day. We haven't shut anybody out since 2015. So maybe that's North Alabama. Who knows? But I think when you look at this game, I think that the mobile quarterback might give you some fits, but I think you're just all around the better team. Coming off a bye week, they do have a little confidence coming off that Pitt win, but I picked Florida State to win 45-17. Just really because I think 45, you've scored 30 plus in 10 games in a row. I think you're going to have no problem there scoring on this defense, even though their defense is okay. But then the 17 points, I just give that to them because their offense isn't great, but when you look at what they did against Pitt with the mobile quarterback, and you could get into garbage time, and they're still trying to learn, so they may leave their starters in during garbage time. I'm thinking it's going to be somewhere around 45-17, which is 28-point spread, which is right on top of the number. So I have Florida State getting a big win at home, and just kind of, like you said, it's a get-right game. You can't sleepwalk through this game, but now they're healthy, which is nice. Nobody's got the flu. Nobody's sick. I think the Boston College game was a fluke. But I think getting them at home, I think Florida State should handle their business here.
No doubt. Healthy. I don't have a prediction yet, but yeah. We still haven't seen this team put it together for 4 quarters, play complimentary football. It's been kind of really sporadic. Coming off the bye, like you said, healthy. Jordan Travis, 2 weeks should do like a ton for his health. Go out there, handle business. Mike Norvell's going to want to prove a point. He's going to want to score points. So like you said, I see him scoring 45. And one thing about putting up 45 is you're going to give them a bunch of possessions, especially hopefully in garbage time. Hopefully there's a healthy bit of garbage time in this game, like you said. Really want to see that running game get on track, and hopefully we see that with a healthier Maurice Smith in there. And, Smith Criminal said there could be a slow start with the bye week. I'm hoping it would be a 3:40 game. We're not stuck with 11 a.m. being a home game. Doak Campbell's going to be packed. I believe it's sold out already. So it's sold out. This thing is going to be packed because, Florida State's number 5 in the nation. Even though it's Virginia Tech, it's still a conference game. This thing's going to be packed out. The home field advantage, I feel like, is going to do with that. They should come out firing. Mike Norvell 90% of the time gets a touchdown on that first drive. I'm not sure what that streak's at. He got a field goal, I believe, this past week, getting the touchdown, but still, they score on that first drive. I'm not looking for a slow start. Something's coming on. But man, it was fun. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we get off here? You want to plug? And I'm going to plug our shows for the rest of the week. You got anything lined up you want to plug for PlantTheSpirit.com?
Yeah, man. And I will just say the very last thing real quick that I will say about this Virginia Tech game. I really
– yeah, for sure. We can talk.
And it's just a quick point that I even made in the Q&A that I did for the Virginia Tech site when they asked, how do you see this game going? I said, at the end of the day, man, I really just want to see Florida State play a clean game for 4 entire quarters, because my concern more than anything right now is we all point to the second half of the LSU game. But that game is getting farther and farther in the rearview mirror. And now that they've lost a game, 2 games, against Ole Miss and whatnot, you've seen more close games than you've seen that dominant team. So I just want to see that team again. Like if they come out and they win, 56-6 or something like that, then I'm gonna be like, okay, we figured it out. We're back to the team that we thought we would be. But I just don't think you can come out. I don't think you can come out and have like a 38-24 type of game. That's really just what I want to avoid. I just really want to see them play a clean game for 4 quarters. That's all I'm really looking for in front of a packed house. They got the crowd advantage. They got the home field advantage. So, but yeah, really, as far as what I got going on, I'm going to be doing a co-podcast with Sons of Saturday tomorrow, Virginia Tech. There's some great guys. We're going to be talking about this game. I'm going to do a show this week, probably tomorrow as well. I'll be doing a podcast as well as a YouTube episode. So check that out. Then I always do a written preview if I can get that done. I'll be headed down to Tallahassee on Friday because I'll be at the game. I can't wait. I can't wait to be in a packed Doak Campbell Stadium. But
we'll see you there.
just check us out on social media and plantthespear.com, and you'll see everything we have. We stay pretty active and stuff like that. I'm going to drop a little hype video I made for this game tomorrow. It is on YouTube if you want a little sneak peek as well. I'm going to drop it tomorrow on social media. But yeah, man, I'll see you there. It's I know we got to kind of hang out for a little bit at the Southern Miss game, which was fun, and I'm just looking forward to this one. I'm really I'm excited to be back in Doak, and like you said, you know, you have this game sold out, Duke is sold out, Miami sold out. So Doak is back, and it's going to be rocking, and I'm excited, and I'm just ready for the Noles to take care of business.
I'm so ready to get a tailgate at Doak Campbell. Everybody, hopefully you can make it over there, Jesse. We got the it's the I'm not sure even what they're calling it, but it's Lot 19, Spear Addicts, Den Media Group, and Dope Talk. CJ Wilson, James Coleman, and Chris Frazier putting on their big tailgate like they do every home game, every big neutral site game, even some road games, etc. I believe it's going to be 12:15 to like 9:30, something like that. Make sure you get your tickets if you haven't already. If you're going to come through there, you never know who's going to come through. P-Dub, Snoop Menace. I've got to talk to E.G. Green, Kenny Shaw, everybody, all kind of different great people at that thing. Recruits. Rob DeLoach usually comes through. Guys like that. Make sure y'all come through. You don't want
Is
to
that
miss
this Saturday?
Yes, sir. This
Okay.
Saturday, Lot 19 over there by Clement Plaza. If you're familiar with that parking
Okay.
plaza over there.
I didn't know they were having one. I might have to swing through there. I'll be there, and I don't really have any tailgating plans. So
For sure. That's everything. I mean, when they do it right. Your entry fee covers food, all you can eat, all you can drink while it's there. And yeah, for sure, come see us. I'm sure a lot of times they'll have to get the game on. They'll have a big screen. Even if you don't want to go in the game and you want to just hang out at the tailgate and watch it there, you can do that. We'll go live after the game for the FSU Voice of College Football post-game show. Hoping Jake Crane can join me for that. I've got a soft commitment from him on that. So Renegade Report people tune in on that. I may stream it on this channel as well. But yeah, hopefully Jake Crane can join me for that. But Thursday, the Renegade Report will be the 10th episode. We've got the guys again from Boundary Corner Podcast. It's the Virginia Tech Podcast. I don't want to say the guy's name right, but wrong right now. But he's the co-host of that. Again, it's the Boundary Corner Podcast. He's going to be on here for the Virginia Tech preview. A more in-depth. We'll break down both the rosters, and we'll have a better chance, better idea about health by then. And also, of course, the weekly Wednesday live stream for the Voice of College Football with James Coleman and Chris Frazier of Spear Addicts on Wednesday. That one is at 6 Eastern. Thursday, 7 Eastern, and then, of course, about 15, 20 minutes after the game on Saturday. Thanks, man. Thanks for joining us, Jesse. This was a lot of fun. PlantTheSpear.com. Make sure y'all go follow him. Subscribe to his YouTube channel if you're not already. It's all about the Noles, baby. Go Noles.
Definitely. I appreciate you having me on, my man. I really enjoyed it. And, I really just admire what you're doing at Renegade Report, man, because you're really an up-and-comer in kind of the rogue media, as I call it, where we just kind of have to make our own way a little bit. So you're really doing an excellent job. I've just enjoyed watching your growth over the past year or two, and I'm really excited for the future for all of us little guys who are trying to make it in a big world. So I appreciate you having me on, and I really enjoyed it. We'll have to do it again sometime. Go Noles.
Absolutely. And all that applies, man. Again, like I said about your graphic art and stuff, this is what it's all about, man. We come on each other's show, and it's all about building each other up. And we've got a pretty big group, and it's growing. And I call it the new era media, rogue media, whatever you want to call it. It's a beautiful thing. And as long as these Noles keep climbing, we'll keep climbing right on next to them.
Yes, sir.
We'll see y'all next time.